We will now pass the basket. This is a weekly STEP meeting. Our format is as follows. The speaker is asked to talk for 25 to 30 minutes on the STEP of that week, followed by discussion or questions until 7 p.m. You can find these weekly meetings on YouTube, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Well, that brings us to the speaker portion of the meeting on this day, March 29, 2021, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, at the Monday night 6 p.m. Stay Alive Literature and Step Group at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Tonight's speaker is Pat, and he will be sharing his experience, strength, and hope on Step 12. Let's all welcome Pat to the meeting.
Hi, everybody. My name's Pat, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Pat.
And I've been to this meeting on Saturday nights, but it's the first time here, so appreciate being here. I think I might want to tell you a little bit about me first, to kind of bring you to the people that 12-stepped me, and then consequently how I've kept my link in the chain somewhat strong, and have worked with other people as well. And my sobriety date is September 8th, 1981. My first meeting was the day after Labor Day, 1981. I lost my job that morning. I worked on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and I was let go. I was told on the Friday before that weekend, if you were going to be 15 minutes late, don't bother coming in anymore, because they knew my reputation for Monday. So if you have a 3-day weekend, chances are Tuesday's not good. And I lost my job that day. And in a state of absolute fear and terror that I lived with for many years before I got sober, I just back up a little bit. I drank, I seem to have been born this way. When we read that, I always think that there's type 1 diabetes that you're born with, and some people eat their way into it. I think the same thing about alcoholism. I think some of us seem to have been born this way, and others drink their way into it. I seem to have been born this way. There's a long line of alcoholics in my family. My father was an alcoholic, single father, raised us, wasn't around a lot, and but he died of COVID in April, sober, 42 years. And on when I was 17 years old and graduated high school, some of my friends went to college. I went to Wildwood. I moved to Wildwood, New Jersey. And I lived in an attic apartment. Somebody said one time, addicts live in the attic. I lived in the attic apartment in a old home, and I worked at Max Pizza from 4 to midnight. I had a fake ID. Drinking age was 18 then. Drank at the Shamrock every night from midnight to 5 a.m. and never saw the beach. But there was no plan for the future. And I'm telling you this for a reason. So when I came home, and I often lived on people's couches and never really had a steady job. I couldn't keep a job. I worked in restaurants primarily. And had no hopes, no dreams, no plans for the future, no hobbies. The only time I felt connected as a teenager was in the woods, drinking Colt 45 or Boone's Farm Apple or whatever, and when you're a young kid. And so my progression was I drank to come out and play. I drank just to come out because I started having things that I have names for now, like panic disorder and social phobias. And didn't have names for it then, just thought I was crazy. And then I drank to stave off withdrawal. That's my progression. And I became what my father was, which was a maintenance drinker. I drank around the clock. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit of what kind of alcoholic I was. I was urinating blood every day. I had alcoholic bloat, a swollen liver. I shook tremendously from the time I was 15 or 16 years old. I remember being 16, working in a restaurant, and a waitress noticed me trying to put glasses down on a table, and she was probably 50 or 60 and said, "How old are you?" And I said, 16. She said, "You're way too young to shake like that." So my alcoholism was apparent to other people, but my biggest fear was a fear of being found out. I didn't want anybody to know. And so it takes more and more alcohol is the medicine for alcoholism. It takes more and more medicine as the progression goes, and some of alcohol's substitutes to help me through that, because I didn't want to be found out. I was tremendously afraid of being found out, because my act was I didn't care. I was a free spirit. I was this. I was none of that. I was terrified all the time. But that's not how I portrayed myself to the rest of the world. So when you're living with that phoniness, that terrified loneliness that they talk about in the big book, if you're that much of a fraud, you can only be living in terrified loneliness because you're not letting anybody in. And that's how I lived. And so on September 8th, 1981, I overslept. I lost my job. I was back at my father's house. And when I came home this 15th time to my dad's house, he was the only one living there at the time, the centerpiece of our living room, 900 square foot rancher that we lived in, the centerpiece was a bar. And I came home this time, and the bar was no longer in the living room. My father smoked 3 packs of Pall Mall cigarettes a day. The house didn't smell like smoke anymore. And I went to use the bathroom. There was a bunch of AA literature. I think planted, because one was Are You Too Young? One of the pieces of pamphlets. And my father had gotten sober. And so that particular morning, I came upstairs, and my father said, "Do you think you have a problem with alcohol?" Never asked me that before. And I fell to my knees in front of my father. I told him I can't stop. I was shaken apart. I was sick, humiliated from what I did on Labor Day, which was ride a tricycle naked through a party of a couple hundred people. That's my last drink, by the way. I'm 61 years old. I still got to talk about riding a tricycle naked. That's my last drink. Probably should have stayed out another day and did something different, but that's it. And so anyway, my father said, I don't think I can help you, but I'll get someone that can. And this is before cell phones. He said, pick up the extension. And I picked it up, and it was, some of you know, a guy named, they call him New York John M. And John M. convinced me to come to a meeting that night. And so that was him working the 12-step. I didn't know that at the time. This stranger on the other end of the phone convinced me I should come to a meeting when I couldn't leave the house without alcohol or substitutes. And somehow I agreed because he was a good salesman. And he must have said some things on the phone that compelled me to come to my first AA meeting. And I met him there. He's been my sponsor for 39 and a half years. The most profound relationship I've ever had in my life. I talk to him every day, not because he's my sponsor, but because he's my closest friend, my confidant, my ally. And in some ways, we just help each other. And that's what AA is all about. And so I just wanted to kind of set that stage. And then a lot of people that loved me into sobriety, a lot of people that kind of put up with me. And I was obnoxious after a short period of time. I still had this fear of being found out, even in AA, and would say outrageous things at meetings. I was an atheist. My favorite step meetings were the 3rd and 11th step, when I could tell everybody they were all sheep and sound ridiculous. I'm embarrassed for you. It's the kind of stuff I would say at a meeting. So I'm not proud of any of that. I'm just trying to tell you I was a young, angry young man that was really feared up. And so what led me to, because 12 is really obviously where we practice these principles, right? Where we try to carry this message to another alcoholic. And so that's challenging, and for someone like myself, and for a lot of us, I guess, because I didn't have a message. I didn't have any meaning or purpose. I was full of shame when I got to AA. And, I understand the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am something bad. And I was full of shame. I was convinced that I wasn't a good human being. And I wasn't worthy of a lot of things that were good in life. And I would sabotage anything that was. And so when I got to AA, that's how I felt about myself. I was just full of shame, and people kept loving me and accepting me and telling me to come back. I tell this story all the time, but there was a meeting. I was sober about a year. I was 22 years old, and It was a lot of old people in the room, probably younger than me now, but they were old when I was 22, got sober at 21. And it was a Friday night, and I was pissed off to be sober, and I called all the women a bunch of whores, and you men were a bunch of J.O.s, and I said all this out, F-bombs every other way. It didn't even make sense. The meeting went from 8 to 9. I did that at 8:58 because you don't want to do that shit early, right? You want to wait until, if you're going to get thrown out, wait to the end. I don't want rebuttals, right? And so I swear to God, I thought I was getting thrown out and I was going to the Hamiltonville to get drunk. And what do you think happened? People lined up to hug me, told me keep coming back. And one lady in particular, her name was Alice. She asked me, she was old enough to be my mom because she had a daughter that was my age. And Alice waited till everybody left, and she said, would you like to go have ice cream with me at the Parfait House? And I sat with Alice eating a hot fudge sundae on a Friday night with a woman old enough to be my mother at 22, thinking this sucks, right? I mean, this is AA. But that was 12-step work at its core, man. She didn't have any wisdom that changed my life. She stopped me from going to the Hamilton Villa for 2 hours, and I went home that night and I stayed sober another day. And so people like that practice this 12-step, that it's nothing dramatic that we're doing. We're saying, do you want to grab coffee? Do you need a ride to a meeting? Here's my phone number. Sponsorship and all that stuff's important, but it's all the other little things that we do. Alice wasn't my sponsor. She just knew that I was going to get drunk if she didn't spend a couple hours with me. And I talk about Alice. She's part of my story. I've been telling that story for 38 years. It happened a year into my sobriety. I've been telling that story ever since. And I mention Alice. And if she's in the room, I cry every time because Alice means that much to me. And so I want to mean that much to somebody. I want to be part of that. I want to carry the message the way Alice did. So those acts of kindness that changed my life. And now I want to get into a little bit about, what happened to me. And I'm just going to read this part in Working with Others. It's my favorite 2 paragraphs in the book. Practical experience shows us that nothing will so much as ensure our immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help where no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on new meaning to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. I agree with that 1,000%. And when I'm going to have to talk about, I have to back up to talk about 12, because when I was sober about a year and a half, I started having panic attacks again. And they terrified me. Because the only way I knew to manage them was alcohol and other things. And I was at a noontime meeting. There was a guy, his name was Jim Laramie. He used his last name, and people accused him of being a big book thumper, and I don't even know what that means. But he would always show up in his Datsun B210. It was like a clown. He'd go to the rescue mission. 10 guys would get out of this car that held 4, and he was that kind of guy, constantly carrying the message. And he intimidated me a little bit. And one day after a new meeting, I asked him if I could talk to him. He said, sure, let's go to Pat's Diner. It was a diner near the club in Trenton. And I talked and told him what was going on, and I was honest. I said, I'm having panic attacks again. I didn't even know what they were initially. And I talked about all this self-centered fear that I was having. And he said to me that if I don't accept God, then I got to be God. And he knew I was an atheist. And he said, but you're going to have to figure this out, because you're looking to yourself to overcome the things that are bringing you fear and pain, and you're the cause of it. So you're going to have to find something else. And if you don't accept God, then you got to be God. And I said, I don't know how to do that. He said, we got to go through with the rest of the steps to clear away some of the clouds that are blocking the sunlight of the Spirit from reaching you. You're never going to get it by hoping that you get it or reading step 3 100 times or whatever. You're stuck, and you're going to have to go through it the rest of the process. And the reason why I share that is that there's people like me that I was raised by atheists, my parents were atheists, I was truly an atheist, and I didn't think that I could get the program because I saw 2 and 3 and said, I'll never get to 4. And Jim said, we got to do 4 through 9 to clear up some of the stuff that's blocking the sunlight of Spirit from reaching you. So we went back to his apartment, and he read the big book, How It Works, out loud. And when we got to the 3rd step, he told me to get on my knees and hold his hand and read this 3rd step. And I felt like a hypocrite. But as soon as I got done, he said, now I want you to promise me you'll do that with other men. And I didn't even know what he meant, but I said, yeah, okay, like that. And he goes, no. He stopped me and said, no, I want you to promise me you'll do this with other men, what we just did. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I didn't know at the time why he made me do that, but I know now. And it made a profound impact on my life that Jim took the time, had me go through the steps. I did my 5th step with him a month or so later. I followed through with the rest of the steps through 9. And then I became on fire with helping other men. And what I figured out was I learned to love in other men the things I desperately needed to forgive in myself. I didn't know that's what would happen, but the things that I was so full of shame about were the most useful things I had to offer another human being. I was sexually molested as a kid. I didn't know that could be something that could help somebody else. There's things that happened in my family that I was ashamed of. I didn't know that other men could benefit if I could share that experience and be vulnerable enough and open enough to be truly seen. And I didn't know that would give my life purpose and meaning when it was meaningless and purposeless for so long. And so I didn't want to miss that. And to watch AA grow up around me, to have the kind of friends I have today. I'll tell you a quick story, then I'll be quiet. My father, as I told you, died of COVID in a nursing home in April. And my father was completely intact upstairs, but his body shut down. He could no longer. 11 years he was at this house that we lived in, didn't want to go into a nursing home. We've had him in places. He calls cabs. He figures out how to get out. And but he got so bad that I used to take him to meetings in a wheelchair. He got so bad he couldn't get out of a chair anymore. He used to defecate in his chair. I used to go clean him up. And I hired other people. And it got so bad he was getting sores and all kinds of stuff. And it was horrible, but he wouldn't leave. And finally, for probably 2 years, he kept telling me he wanted to kill himself. And him and I hadn't been to a meeting in years. He wouldn't allow anybody to come to the house. He was embarrassed. And finally, one Sunday, when I was there, he said to me, I need to go to a facility. And me and my sisters have been waiting for him to say that for years. And I said, Dad, I'll make that happen. And we got him into a nursing home in early December of 2019. COVID hit in March. He was dead in April. So in December, my father hated this place, of course. He hated everything. And about a week into it, he decided that he was having a heart attack. He wasn't having a heart attack. He just told them he was having a heart attack, so he couldn't figure out how to get out. He couldn't call cabs anymore. So they got an ambulance, and they took him to Princeton Hospital. And it was on a Friday. He's smart. He figured they might keep me for the weekend. And they said, there's nothing wrong with your dad. We're going to send him back in the transport. And he called me up and said, I ain't going. I like it here. I said, Dad, it's not a hotel. You're in a freaking hospital. You got to go. And he said, I ain't going back there. So anyway, the nurse called me back. She said, we're going to keep him for the weekend. So it was Friday. They kept him until Monday. My sponsor, I called him. I said, I can't talk to this guy. You got to help me. And he called my father and said, Larry, I'll tell you what. if you go back and it's really, we can't find ways to make it a better experience, we'll figure something else out. John's a good salesman. My dad believed him. They put him in a transport. They took him back. When he left, he didn't have a roommate. When he got back, he had a roommate, and on his hospital table, one of those tables that go over the bed, he had the book as Bill sees it. And his roommate said, I got that book. I'm sober 22 years. And my father called John and said, I got an idea. I want to start an AA meeting in a nursing home. And so we started an AA meeting every Wednesday. They gave us the library. And it was probably 12 of us that went to that meeting religiously. One was my sponsor, probably 6 guys I sponsor, probably another handful of other guys, and it was a powerful meeting. My father went from wanting to commit suicide to talking about gratitude and how much he loved AA. And I thought my father wanted to kill himself because he was in pain. He wanted to kill himself because he lost his connection to AA. And when he got his connection to AA back, he wanted to live and felt grateful again. And it was a remarkable transformation. So we still have that meeting every Wednesday night on Zoom. And there's probably 18 of us now. It's the best meeting of the week. My father was an atheist. We talk a lot about God. It would have pissed him off. But the code to get in is Larry. That was my father's name. And we all mention my father. Somebody mentions my dad every week. And unfortunately, he had to die alone. They shut down the nursing home. He couldn't see his kids. Or we didn't have the AA meeting for the last 6 weeks. But I'm telling you that because connection is what we're all looking for. You can say you're not. You can pretend you're a lone wolf or whatever. We're all looking for connection. And I found connection in AA. I found people that love me unconditionally. I love you unconditionally. The worse your resume, the more we want you. I'm so grateful for AA. I have a daughter. Mary's adopted. She's Korean. And on her 15th birthday, she got arrested. And she wanted them to call me, and I went and got her. And that night, she came to my room. It was my home group. It was a Tuesday night. And she came to my room at 7:30. I was getting ready to go to the meeting, and she said, am I too young to be an alcoholic? I said, it's not for me to decide, but I'm going to a meeting if you want to go. She came to a meeting, and you loved her the way you loved me, and she's sober 12 years. And she got sober at 15 years old. She's sober 12 years. So I'm just so blessed. I have a son that's sober a year. My dad died sober. I've been sober. Hopefully we changed and set an example for anybody that comes after us. I got 4 kids, and the other two, don't seem to have a problem. But I want to be a message for others, and I want to be able to do what Jim Laramie asked me to commit to do, which is keep my link in the chain strong and carry the message when possible. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Please limit your sharing to 3 minutes, and don't forget to remove your mask. Please keep your shares related to this step. If you feel like drinking or if you've had a drink today, please see me or speak to someone after the meeting. We ask that you please refrain from the use of profanity. We are in a church and are in a spiritual journey. I'd like to open the meeting.